my last 5 to 7 years at TNA, I saw a drastic change in the athlete. Bro, I saw this 10 years ago, man. This didn't just happen. And I'm always, trying to figure out, and it's kind of like football. Like how did the game change? When we look at, let's go to wrestling. This is the wrestling podcast, and I'm glad I'm speaking to you. But my God, Steve, you and I grew up in the same era, okay? And to me, there's 3 triangles to professional wrestling. There always have been 3 triangles. There's the psychology of the match. There's the 2 characters in the ring. And there's the storyline that's threading it all together. That's the perfect triangle, bro. I started watching wrestling in 1970. It was there from 1970 till somewhere around the early 2000s. All of a sudden, here we are in 2018, and if you look at that perfect triangle, none of the sides exist. None. There's no longer characters, there's no longer stories, and there's very little ring psychology. There's a lot of flip-flop and flying. There's very little ring psychology. And Steve, I beat my head against the desk because I'm like, listen, things change in football. Things change in baseball. New rules are put into play. In baseball, the designated hitter was a huge rule. They're always trying to speed up the game. But here's the difference. The foundation of those sports never change. The foundation has always been the same. The foundation of professional wrestling is no longer the same. It is not professional wrestling. Now, if they want to call it something else like, American lucha or whatever they want to call it, I don't have an issue with that. But I keep trying to figure out. It was the same in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. What the hell made wrestling change so much in the last decade?
Short attention span.
But you say short attention span, Steve, and that's a great point. But Steve, back in the Attitude Era when we had our matches, bro, it was Crash TV. I mean, we were like in and out of everything because we knew back then people had short attention spans. So it was like, get on to the next thing. Don't lose them. Move it. When you say short attention span, Steve, bro, the matches now are going longer than they ever went before. So, I mean, that's where I'm like, well, the attention span does get shorter daily, but the matches seem to be going on longer and longer and longer.
So you're not a fan of the long match?
I'm not, Steve. Steve, can I tell you how I look at it? And I think you'll appreciate, bro, we're both huge Rocky fans, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, now let's compare Rocky to professional wrestling. If you take all the Rocky movies or concentrate on one, whatever the case may be, and Steve, all of a sudden we take the characters out of it. We take away the character of Rocky Balboa and Apollo Creed. We take away the storyline. This bum from Philadelphia getting a shot. We take that all away, and all of a sudden, all we're seeing is the end of the movie and the boxing match. Are we going to give a rat's ass about that boxing match? Of course we're not. The reason why we care about the match at the end is because of the character and the story, Bill. If you strip away the characters and the story, you've got a choreographed fight. And that's what it is on a weekly basis. And, bro, the casual fans, the world that was watching you, bro, they're bye-bye. They're gone. They're the ones with the short attention spans. They don't want that. They know it's a choreographed fight. If they're not a wrestling fan, they're not going to watch. And the WWE, bro, I can't understand why they did this. I'll never understand. They have whittled down that audience to a little tiny niche market of these wrestling marks. And bro, every time I cut you every Monday night with that yes chant. You drive me crazy with that what chant, bro? What? and Steve, I don't know how we went from the world to 2.5 million people? Somebody needs to explain that to me.
Are you saying then that there's not enough work being done to magnify or identify the characters?
Oh, Steve, it's bad enough that there's no characters, but add to that, no stories. And like I said, at the end of the day, you have long choreographed fights. Everybody's wrestling because they're mad at each other. Bro, you go back and you look at some of the things with you and Taker and Kane and The Rock. Steve, I'll never forget as long as I live, bro. Do you remember how freaking cold it was? And it was after a long day of TV. Do you remember how cold it was when we were out on that freaking bridge, bro? With the belt, and you threw the belt in the ice, bro. It had to be 50 degrees below freaking zero. I was freezing my nuts off. Okay, but that if we didn't do things like that, Steve Austin would have never been who he was. The Rock would have never been who he was. And it was the constants of doing those things week after week after week that made you guys so iconic. Now it's the 6-man. It's the 8-man. It's, oh, Steve. And I get so much heat. But, Steve, I take nothing away from the boys because I think the work ethic of the boys and the ladies is just the same as it was during the Attitude Era. Those guys work their asses off every Monday night. No, I take nothing away from it. But when you don't give them meat on the bone, why am I watching this? If I want to see a real fight, I will watch UFC. You know, Steve, so many people tell me, and I want to get your take on this. And I say this in the most respectful way as possible. And I think you'll know exactly what I'm saying. I get my critics all the time who don't. Vince Russo didn't exist during the Attitude Era. I had nothing to do with it. I wasn't there. You know, and then I'll get a lot of them saying, well, Vince, of course, you know, you guys did record ratings because look at the roster you guys had. You guys had the greatest wrestling roster of all time. And I would stop and I would say to them, listen to what you're saying. You are absolutely correct. We had the greatest roster of all time. But my job was to feed that roster on a weekly basis. And when I had a character like Steve Austin, I'm writing every single week so his stock is going up and up and up. I could not bring down Steve Austin or bring down The Rock or The Taker with what was written. We had to keep topping what we did the week before. And that was the great challenge to me. Steve, I say this all the time. I would have never dreamed of walking into a building and handing Steve Austin a piece of crap. Like, are you free? Like, first of all, you would have looked at me like, bro, what are you kidding me? You would have laughed me out of the building. You were so great. I knew I had to write to that freaking level. And that was the challenge, bro, because you guys were so good. I couldn't phone it in. I was trying to get you from here to here. And that's what people don't understand, man. When you have great talent like a Steve Austin, do you know how easy it is for him to come down the ladder rather than go up? And what did we have to do, Steve? We had to go to a freaking bridge at 12 o'clock at night in the freezing cold outside to keep up in the game, up in the game, up in the game. They don't do that today, bro. I look at this. I don't know what's going on creatively. I don't want to know, but it comes across like there is just zero effort being put in the creative.